When disabled tech millionaire Marcus Chen hires Sarah Foster as his caregiver, her uncanny resemblance to his late wife sets in motion a chain of buried secrets. As Marcus begins to heal under Sarah's care, they uncover a decades-old deception that will change both their lives forever. The truth, it seems, was hidden in plain sight all along. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The glass and steel mansion loomed over Sarah Foster as she pulled into the circular driveway. Water trickled down the 3-story waterfall that framed the entrance, creating a constant white noise that matched her nervous heartbeat. She checked her watch, 2:55 p.m. Early, but not too early for her interview with Marcus Chen. Inside, Marcus Chen's personal assistant, James Wilson, sat at a desk in the foyer, looking haggard. A stack of resumes lay scattered across his desk, and he barely glanced up when Sarah approached. "Another candidate?" he asked, reaching for a clipboard. "Sarah Foster. I have an appointment at 3. The sound of something crashing came from down the hall, followed by angry shouting. James winced. "Mr. Chen is having a difficult day. Maybe we should reschedule." "I heard that," a deep voice bellowed from the other room. "Send her in. Let's get this over with." James led Sarah down a hallway lined with abstract paintings, their bold colors at odds with the stark white walls. "Fair warning," he whispered. "This is our 8th interview today. Mr. Chen has been particular. The home office where Marcus Chen waited was a study in controlled chaos. Papers littered every surface, and a broken glass lay shattered near the window. Marcus sat in his wheelchair behind a massive desk, his sharp features twisted in frustration as he attempted to reach a tablet that had slid just out of reach. Sarah stepped forward automatically. "May I?" Marcus looked up, irritation clear on his face, and froze. The tablet clattered to the floor, forgotten. His face drained of color, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might faint. His hands gripped the wheelchair's armrests so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Mr. Chen." James rushed forward. "Are you all right?" Marcus didn't respond, staring at Sarah with an intensity that made her want to check her reflection. Had she smeared her makeup? Was something caught in her teeth? But no, this was something else. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, taking a step back. "Should I come back another time?" "No." Marcus's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, more composed. "No, please. Stay." "James, leave us." James hesitated. "Sir, after what happened with the last candidate dash, leave us." Once they were alone, Marcus continued to stare at Sarah, his dark eyes studying every detail of her face. She forced herself to stand still under his scrutiny, though everything in her wanted to squirm. Finally, he spoke. "Your resume says you have 5 years' experience in rehabilitation therapy?" "Yes, sir. Primarily working with spinal cord injuries." "And before that?" "Nursing school at UCLA. I graduated top of my class." Marcus wheeled himself around the desk, moving closer. "Family?" "None, sir. I was adopted as an infant. My adoptive parents passed away in my teens." Something flickered across his face. Pain? Recognition? But disappeared so quickly Sarah couldn't be sure she'd seen it at all. He continued his questioning, but Sarah noticed his eyes never left her face, even when consulting her resume. The technical questions about her medical knowledge seemed almost perfunctory. After 20 minutes, James knocked and entered with another candidate's file. "Sir, your 3:30 is here. Cancel all other interviews," Marcus said. "Miss Foster starts tomorrow." James's mouth fell open. "But sir, we haven't done a background check," called her references dash. "Then do it tonight. Miss Foster starts tomorrow." Marcus's tone left no room for argument. 8 a.m. sharp. Outside the office, James caught Sarah's arm. "I don't know what just happened in there," he said in a low voice. "But be careful. Mr. Chen isn't himself lately. This job, it's not just about physical therapy. He's been through a trauma. He needs someone stable, professional. Someone who can maintain appropriate boundaries." Sarah nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that appropriate boundaries were already crumbling. Something had happened in that office, something neither she nor James understood, but something that had clearly shaken Marcus Chen to his core. As she walked to her car, she heard raised voices from the office window above. "She looks exactly like Dash. I know who she looks like, but she's qualified, and she's here and I'm hiring her. This isn't healthy, Marcus. You can't replace Dash." "I'm not replacing anyone. The discussion is over." Sarah started her car, her hands shaking slightly on the wheel. She had the job, a position that would pay off her student loans in under a year. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she just stepped into something far more complicated than a simple caregiving role. As she drove away, she caught a glimpse of Marcus watching from his office window, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt like she'd just passed some test she hadn't known she was taking, and she had no idea what the consequences would be. Sarah's first week at the Chun mansion proved more challenging than any medical rotation she'd ever worked. It wasn't the physical demands. Marcus was far from her most difficult patient, but rather the constant weight of his attention. His eyes followed her everywhere, studying her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. During their first physical therapy session in the mansion's state-of-the-art gym, Sarah demonstrated the exercises they'd be doing together. "We'll start with passive range of motion," she explained, lifting his right leg. "Then progress to dash. You hold your breath when you concentrate," Marcus interrupted. "Just like..." He cut himself off, his face tightening. "Like who?" "Never mind. Continue." But these moments kept happening. When she laughed at something James said, Marcus dropped a glass of water. When she absent-mindedly tucked her hair behind her ear during lunch, he wheeled himself away from the table so quickly he nearly crashed into a wall. Every natural gesture she made seemed to trigger some memory that left him shaken. The breaking point came during their third therapy session. Sarah was helping Marcus with his arm exercises when she spontaneously hummed a few bars of an old song, something her adoptive mother used to sing. Marcus jerked away from her touch as if burned. "What was that?" he demanded. "That song. Where did you learn that?" I don't know. It's just something I've always known." "Why?" Marcus's face had gone chalk white. "Get out," he whispered. "Mr. Chun, we're in the middle of dash. Get out." Sarah backed away as Marcus began to hyperventilate, his hands shaking violently. She reached for the emergency call button, but James was already rushing in, likely having heard the shouting. "What happened?" James demanded, hurrying to Marcus's side. "I don't know," Sarah said. "I was just humming, and he..." "That song," Marcus gasped between breaths. "Emma's song. Her mother's lullaby." James shot Sarah a warning look. "Maybe you should take the rest of the day off." Instead of going home, Sarah found herself wandering the mansion's vast library. The walls were lined with books, but it was the photographs that drew her attention. Most were of Marcus's tech innovations, magazine covers celebrating his success. But in a corner, partially hidden behind a potted plant, she found a smaller frame. The photo showed Marcus standing beside a woman at what looked like a company party. She was laughing at something off camera, her head thrown back in genuine joy. Sarah's hand trembled as she lifted the frame closer. It was like looking in a mirror. The woman had her exact nose, her exact smile. Even the way she held herself was familiar, though Sarah had never seen this photo before. The only difference was the hair color. The woman's was a rich auburn while Sarah's was blonde. "That's Emma." James's voice made her jump. He stood in the doorway, his expression grave. "Marcus's wife. She died in the same accident that put him in the wheelchair." "When?" 2 years ago. Drunk driver. Marcus was driving. He's never forgiven himself, though it wasn't his fault. James took the photo from her hands, replacing it carefully. "Now you understand why he hired you so quickly, and why this is so difficult for him." Sarah sank into a nearby chair. "I should resign. This isn't healthy for him." "No," James said firmly. "Since you started, he's actually attending his therapy sessions." He's taking his medications. He's engaging with the world again. Whatever this is, he gestured at the photo, is helping him somehow. Just be careful with him and with yourself. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the song she'd hummed, the one she'd believed came from her adoptive mother. Had she heard it somewhere else? And the way she tucked her hair, the way she laughed. Were these learned behaviors, or was something stranger at work? She pulled out her phone and Googled Emma Chen death. Dozens of articles appeared. The tragic accident that claimed the life of tech millionaire Marcus Chen's wife and left him paralyzed. But it was the photos that held her attention. In every one, Emma Chen looked back at her with her own face, her own expressions, her own gestures. Sarah closed the browser, her heart pounding. She'd taken this job because the pay was exceptional and the experience would look good on her resume. Now she felt trapped in someone else's ghost story, playing a role she didn't understand. Tomorrow, she decided she would act completely professional. No humming, no casual gestures, no friendly chat. She would be the most clinical caregiver possible. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, a strange thought followed her into her dreams. What if these weren't Emma's mannerisms she was copying? What if they had been her own all along? The breakthrough came during a grueling therapy session 3 weeks into Sarah's employment. Marcus was attempting to transfer himself from his wheelchair to the therapy table, a movement he'd done successfully dozens of times before when his arm gave out. Sarah caught him before he could fall, her body bracing his weight with practiced efficiency. "I've got you," she said firmly, holding him steady. "Take a breath. We'll do it together." For once, Marcus didn't flinch at her touch or stare at her face. Instead, he focused on her instructions, his breathing steadying as they completed the transfer together. Something had shifted in that moment of vulnerability. A tiny crack in the wall he'd built between them. "I used to be able to lift twice my body weight," he said later, as Sarah helped him with his shoulder exercises. "Now I can barely lift myself." "The accident?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral, professional. Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, it was raining. The other driver was drunk, crossed the median. "I tried to swerve." His hands clenched into fists. "I woke up 3 days later. They told me Emma didn't make it." Sarah continued the exercises, giving him space to talk or be silent. Her steady presence seemed to draw more words from him. "Everyone said it wasn't my fault. The other driver died too. But I was the one driving. I was the one who suggested we take the scenic route home. If I'd just taken a different road, left earlier, later." Sarah kept her voice gentle. "You could drive yourself crazy with what-ifs." "I already have." He attempted a weak smile. "Just ask James." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the repetitive movements of therapy creating a rhythm between them. When Sarah helped him back into his chair, he seemed lighter somehow, as if sharing the story had lifted a weight. Later that afternoon, they sat in the mansion's sprawling garden. Sarah had suggested moving their recovery sessions outdoors, and Marcus had surprised her by agreeing. The garden had been Emma's project, James had told her, and Marcus hadn't spent time here since her death. "You're different," Marcus said suddenly, "from the other therapists. Because I look like her?" "No." He turned his chair to face her. "Because you're not afraid of silence. Everyone else tries to fill it with cheerful nonsense or medical jargon. You just let things be." Sarah adjusted the umbrella shading them from the late summer sun. "Sometimes silence says more than words. Like now." There was a hint of humor in his voice, the first she'd heard. "Like now." She smiled, then hesitated before adding, "I learned it from my mother, my adoptive mother. She died when I was 16, cancer. She taught me that being present is sometimes more important than knowing what to say." Marcus studied her, but for the first time, he seemed to be seeing Sarah herself, not Emma's ghost. "Tell me about her." "She was a librarian, quiet but strong. When she got sick, she never complained. Just held my hand and listened to me read her favorite books." Sarah swallowed hard. "After she died, I found out I was adopted. I'd always known, but I found the papers. I never knew anything about my birth mother except that she died right after I was born. The air between them grew heavy with unspoken connections, both marked by loss, both carrying questions without answers. A butterfly landed on Marcus's wheelchair, its wings slowly opening and closing in the warm air. She would have liked you, Marcus said quietly. Your wife, Emma. He spoke her name without flinching, another first. She believed in letting things unfold naturally. No pushing, no forcing. Just. He gestured at the garden around them. Letting things grow. Sarah watched the butterfly take flight, disappearing into the carefully tended roses. Like us? This therapy? Maybe. Marcus wheeled himself forward slightly, testing his improved arm strength. I won't break, you know, if you want to ask about her. I know. Sarah stood, brushing grass from her pants. But like you said, some things need to unfold naturally. As they headed back inside, Sarah caught their reflection in the garden windows. For a moment, they looked like any other therapist and patient, no ghosts between them. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, like pieces of a puzzle slowly moving into place. That night, she added another article to her growing research folder. Emma Chen's obituary. One line stood out. Memorial contributions may be made to the New Life Adoption Agency. The same agency, Sarah noted with a shiver, that had handled her own adoption 27 years ago. But that had to be a coincidence, didn't it? The discovery happened on a routine Thursday morning. Sarah was organizing Marcus's medical documents for an upcoming specialist appointment, sorting through files in his home office. A manila envelope slipped from between two folders, spilling its contents across the floor. As she gathered the scattered papers, one document caught her eye. Adoption records, dated exactly 27 years ago. Sarah's hands trembled as she read. The date matched her birth date exactly. The hospital was the same one listed on her own adoption papers. But it was the next line that made her blood run cold. Birth mother, deceased during delivery, just like her own records had stated. She was so absorbed in the document that she didn't hear the wheelchair approaching. What are you doing? Marcus's voice cracked like a whip through the quiet room. Sarah jumped, the papers falling from her hands. I'm sorry. I was organizing the files and these fell. Those are private. Marcus's face had gone pale, his hands gripping his wheelchair arms with white-knuckled intensity. You had no right. Mr. Chun, I wasn't snooping. But these records. She took a deep breath. They match my adoption details exactly. Same hospital, same date, same circumstances with the birth mother. Get out. Please. I need to understand. Get out. Marcus's voice rose to a shout. You're fired. Pack your things and be gone within the hour. Sarah stood her ground. Did Emma work at that hospital? Is that why you hired me? Because I look like her. Marcus wheeled forward, snatching the papers from the floor. You're imagining connections that don't exist. This is a breach of privacy and it's over. James will mail you your final check. The New Life Adoption Agency, Sarah pressed on. It handled these adoptions, didn't it? The same agency mentioned in Emma's obituary. That can't be a coincidence. There is no connection. Marcus's voice shook. Emma worked at many hospitals during her career. She handled many cases. Any similarity to your situation is coincidental. Now leave, before I call security. Sarah gathered her composure, speaking softly but firmly. You're lying. I don't know about what exactly, but you're lying. I can see it in your face, the same face you made when you first saw me. You know something. For a moment, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Pain? Fear? But then his expression hardened. James, he called out. Escort Miss Foster out. Her employment is terminated. That evening, alone in her apartment, Sarah pulled out her laptop. She'd spent months researching her adoption after her adoptive parents died. But now she had new information to work with. She typed Emma Chun Hospital Employment History into the search bar. The results showed Emma had worked at 5 different hospitals over her career. Sarah cross-referenced the dates with her birth records. During the month Sarah was born, Emma had indeed been working at the same hospital as a resident in the maternity ward. Her phone buzzed, a text from James. He's not sleeping, hasn't taken his meds. Whatever you found, it's destroying him all over again. Please, just let it go. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. Then she opened her browser again and typed, New Life Adoption Agency plus Emma Chen. The search returned an article from 28 years ago. The headline made her gasp. Local doctor champions privacy rights for pregnant medical residents. The photo showed a younger Emma, her hand resting protectively over a barely visible bump beneath her white coat. Sarah sat back, her mind racing. Emma had been pregnant while working as a resident. She'd fought for privacy rights for pregnant medical staff. And less than a year later, a baby was given up for adoption at her hospital. A baby whose birth mother supposedly died during delivery. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. The message contained just 4 words. Stop digging, please. Marcus. Sarah closed her laptop, but her mind wouldn't stop spinning. If Emma was pregnant 28 years ago, what happened to that baby? Why had Marcus kept adoption papers? And why did he react so violently to her finding them? She walked to her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. She'd always attributed her adoption record's vagueness to bureaucratic efficiency, a simple story about a mother who died in childbirth. But now, looking at her face, Emma's face, she wondered if she'd been accepting a convenient lie all these years. She picked up her phone and typed a response to Marcus. I deserve the truth, and I think you do too. Then she opened her laptop again and began a new search. Emma Chen medical residency records. Someone, somewhere, had documented the truth, and Sarah was going to find it. Victoria Chen's arrival at the mansion came without warning. Sarah was helping Marcus with his morning exercises when the sound of heels clicking on marble echoed through the hallway. A tall woman in an impeccable business suit appeared in the doorway, her expression darkening at the sight of Sarah. So it's true, Victoria said, her voice ice-cold. Marcus, have you completely lost your mind? Marcus's shoulders tensed. Victoria, I didn't know you were coming. Clearly, Victoria's eyes never left Sarah's face. I had to hear about this from Gerald on the board. He showed me a photo from last week's therapy session. Do you have any idea how this looks? Sarah, give us a moment, Marcus said quietly. Actually, Victoria interrupted. I'd like her to stay. We should all be clear about what's happening here. She turned to Sarah. How much is he paying you? Excuse me? To play dress-up as my dead sister-in-law. The resemblance is remarkable. Did you have work done? Or is this natural? That's enough. Marcus's voice cracked through the room. Sarah is a qualified professional who just happens to be Emma's twin. Victoria pulled out her phone, swiping through photos. I've been doing some research of my own. New Life Adoption Agency. Emma's pregnancy during residency. The convenient story about a mother dying in childbirth. Did you think nobody would notice? Sarah's heart pounded. You know about the adoption records? I know my brother is allowing himself to be manipulated by someone taking advantage of his grief. Victoria stepped closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. Whatever you're trying to prove, whatever angle you're playing, it stops now. I won't let you destroy what's left of my family. Victoria, Marcus wheeled between them. You don't understand, Dash. I understand perfectly. You found someone who looks like Emma and convinced yourself there's some deeper meaning. But this isn't healthy, Marcus. The board is already talking. Your judgment is being questioned. My judgment is fine, Marcus snapped. Sarah is helping me. I'm making progress, Dash. Because she looks like your dead wife. Because every time you see her face, you get to pretend Emma isn't gone. That's not progress. That's delusion. Sarah found her voice. Mrs. Chun, I understand your concerns, but Dash, Ms. Chun, Victoria corrected sharply. And you understand nothing. My brother lost everything 2 years ago. His wife, his mobility, his sense of purpose. He's vulnerable and you're exploiting that vulnerability. That's not true, Sarah said quietly. There are questions here that need answers. About Emma. About the adoption dash. Victoria's laugh was brittle. Of course. Let me guess. You think you're Emma's long-lost child? That this is all some grand destiny? Do you know how many women give up babies for adoption? How many people share coincidental dates and locations? It's not just coincidence, Marcus said. Victoria, if you just listen dash. No, you listen. Victoria's voice softened. I love you, Marcus. I watched you fall apart after Emma died. I can't watch it happen again. She turned to Sarah. I'll double whatever he's paying you. Just go. Let this family heal. Sarah looked at Marcus, saw the conflict in his face. Is that what you want? Before he could answer, Victoria pressed on. I've already spoken to the board. Either this stops or they'll call for a vote of no confidence. Your choice, Marcus. The room felt too small, too crowded with unspoken things. Sarah gathered her professional demeanor around her like armor. I should go. You need to talk privately. Sarah, wait dash Marcus reached for her, but Victoria stepped between them. I'll have my lawyer draw up a non-disclosure agreement, Victoria called after her. Very generous terms. In the hallway, Sarah leaned against the wall, listening to the siblings' voices rise in argument. She deserves to know the truth. There is no truth, just your desperate need to rewrite the past. James appeared at her elbow. Perhaps you should take the rest of the day off. Sarah nodded, gathering her things. But as she drove home, Victoria's words echoed in her mind. Emma's pregnancy during residency. Not a question, but a statement of fact. Victoria knew something. Something she was desperate to keep buried. Sarah picked up her phone and made a call. Hello. New Life Adoption Agency? I'd like to speak to someone about accessing historical records. Yes, I'll hold. The game had changed. This wasn't just about her anymore, or even about Marcus. Whatever Victoria was trying to protect, whatever truth she was trying to hide, Sarah was going to find it. Despite Victoria's threats, Sarah returned to work the next day. Marcus seemed almost relieved to see her, though neither mentioned his sister's visit. Instead, they fell into a new routine, one that stretched far beyond traditional therapy sessions. You should eat something, Sarah said one evening, noticing the untouched dinner tray. It was well past her normal hours, but she'd stayed to help Marcus with additional exercises. Your medications need to be taken with food. Join me? The invitation came spontaneously, surprising them both. I mean, if you haven't already eaten. That first shared dinner broke some invisible barrier. Soon it became normal for them to eat together, their conversations stretching long after the plates were cleared. Marcus told stories about building his tech empire from scratch, about the early days when failure seemed more likely than success. Sarah shared memories of her adoptive parents, the little details that made them real, her mother's passion for mystery novels, her father's terrible jokes. One night, a storm knocked out the power. James had already left for the day, leaving them sitting in darkness until Sarah found candles in the kitchen. Emma was terrified of storms, Marcus said, watching the candlelight flicker across the walls. Not the thunder or lightning, just the possibility of power failure. She'd had some trauma in her residency years. A backup generator failed during a critical surgery. Sarah noticed he could say Emma's name now without flinching. Did the patient survive? Yes. Emma performed the rest of the surgery by flashlight. But after that, he paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. She became almost obsessive about having backup plans. For everything. Something in his tone made Sarah look up sharply. What kind of backup plans? Before he could answer, a crack of thunder shook the windows. The candles flickered, and for a moment, shadows danced across Marcus's face, making him look older, more vulnerable. Tell me about your mother, he said instead. Your birth mother. What do you imagine she was like? Sarah wrapped her hands around her cooling tea. I used to imagine she was some kind of hero, that she died saving someone or doing something incredibly brave. It was easier than thinking she just died, that she never even got to hold me. Marcus wheeled closer to the window, watching the rain. And now? What do you imagine now? Now I think. Sarah chose her words carefully. I think maybe the story I was told isn't the whole truth. Lightning illuminated the room, and in that brief flash, Sarah caught Marcus wiping his eyes. Your doctor called today, she said, changing the subject. Your latest tests show increased nerve response in your legs. Whatever's been motivating you these past months, it's working. Marcus turned back to her, his expression unreadable in the candlelight. Maybe I finally have something worth fighting for. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Sarah felt the professional boundaries she'd tried so hard to maintain crumbling further. This was more than a patient-caregiver relationship now, more than a possible family connection. This was something else entirely, something dangerous and complicated and impossible to ignore. The lights flickered back on, breaking the spell. Sarah stood quickly. I should go. It's late. Sarah. Marcus caught her hand as she passed. Thank you for coming back. After Victoria, we'll figure this out, she promised. Whatever the truth is, we'll face it together. Later that night, Sarah lay awake in her apartment, thinking about Emma's backup plans, about a resident doctor who'd championed privacy rights for pregnant medical staff, about a woman who'd lost power during surgery and vowed never to be caught unprepared again. What kind of backup plan would a woman like that make for a child she couldn't keep? Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Found something in Emma's old files. Come early tomorrow. Sarah typed back a quick affirmative, then opened her laptop. She had research of her own to do, because if Emma Chun had made backup plans, Sarah was going to find them. All of them. She just hoped they were ready for whatever truths those plans might reveal. Saturday morning found Sarah in the mansion's attic, dust motes dancing in the beams of sunlight streaming through small windows. Marcus had directed her there after showing her a key he'd found hidden in Emma's old medical journal. Third section, behind the old trunks, he'd said. There's a locked chest I never managed to open. Emma's handwriting on that key tag matches the chest's markings. The chest wasn't hard to find. A carved wooden box with brass fittings, smaller than Sarah had expected. Her hands shook slightly as she inserted the key. It turned with a solid click. Inside, the box held a collection of journals, photographs, and loose papers, all meticulously organized with Emma's precise medical handwriting. The first journal was dated 28 years ago. I found it, Sarah called down the attic stairs. Minutes later, she heard the whir of Marcus's chair lift, bringing him up. Together, they began examining the contents. The earliest journal entries detailed Emma's residency, her growing anxiety about her pregnancy, and her fear of losing her position at the hospital. March 15th, Sarah read aloud. Told Marcus about the baby today. He was overjoyed but doesn't understand. Pregnant resident is a liability. They'll delay my certification, push back my surgery rotation. Everything I've worked for, delayed because of one mistake. Marcus's hands gripped his armrests. I never saw these journals. She told me she lost the baby early in the pregnancy. I believed her. Sarah continued reading. April 2nd. Made arrangements today. The adoption agency promises complete confidentiality. Marcus can never know, it would destroy him. Better he think it was a miscarriage. Better to carry this burden alone than watch him try to choose between the baby and my career. He'd choose the baby. He'd always choose family over ambition. It's one of the things I love about him, but I can't let him make that choice. She was protecting me, Marcus whispered. All these years, I thought. Sarah flipped through more pages, then stopped suddenly. Tucked between journal entries was a photograph. A newborn baby with a hospital bracelet clearly visible. The date matched Sarah's birth date. There's more, Sarah said, her voice trembling. She read from a later entry. Gave birth today. They say she's healthy, perfect. I only saw her for a moment before they took her away. Dark hair like Marcus's. They promised she'd go to a good family. Promised she'd be loved. The official record will show complications. A death during delivery. Clean, simple, no loose ends. Except I've made arrangements. A backup plan. Someday, if she wants to know the truth, she'll be able to find it. And if anything happens to me, the truth will find her. Marcus reached for the journal with unsteady hands. All this time, she was alive out there. Our daughter was alive. But why? Sarah's voice cracked. Why go to such lengths to hide it? A baby wouldn't have ended her career forever. It wasn't just about her career. Marcus pulled another journal from the box. Look at this, dated a week before she placed you for adoption. The entry was brief but devastating. Tests came back today. The genetic marker is there. 50% chance the baby will develop the same condition that killed my mother. Marcus's family has already lost so much to illness. I can't bear to watch him raise a child knowing she might face the same fate. Better a clean break. Better he never knows. The adoption agency will place her with a family that has no medical history of the condition. She'll have a chance at a different life. A better one. Sarah sat back, her mind spinning. She gave me up. To protect me? To protect you. Emma's mother died of Huntington's disease, Marcus said quietly. It destroyed their family. Emma tested positive for the gene but hadn't developed symptoms yet. She died before she could develop symptoms, Sarah finished. She looked down at her hands, Emma's hands. Have I been tested? My adoptive parents, they never mentioned. Sarah, Marcus reached for her. Whatever happens, whatever the tests show, we'll face it together. If you want to. Sarah stared at the photograph of the newborn of herself, and then at the man who had unknowingly been her father all along. Everything she'd believed about her life, her identity, her history had shifted in the space of an hour. A noise from the attic stairs made them both turn. Victoria stood there, her face pale. I heard voices, she said. I came to check. Her eyes fell on the open chest, the scattered journals. You found them, Emma's journals. You knew, Marcus said. It wasn't a question. All this time you knew. Victoria stepped forward, her designer heels incongruous in the dusty attic. Emma made me promise. She said if anything ever happened to her, I had to protect you both. From the truth. From the pain of knowing. Sarah stood, Emma's last journal clutched to her chest. Did you know who I was? When you came here last week. Victoria's silence was answer enough. The attic felt too small suddenly, too crowded with secrets and lies and long-buried truths. Sarah needed air, needed space to think. But as she moved toward the stairs, Marcus caught her hand. Stay, he said softly. Please, we have 27 years of truth to uncover. Sarah looked at the box of journals, at Victoria's guilty face, at Marcus's pleading eyes. Then she sat back down, opened the next journal and began to read. I need to get tested. Sarah paced Marcus's study the next morning. The journals spread across his desk. Not just for closure, but for medical history. I have a right to know. Marcus watched her move, seeing Emma's determined stride in every step. I know a specialist, Dr. Reeves. She handled Emma's case, knows our history. I can call her today. And then what? Sarah stopped pacing. If I have the gene, if I'm carrying the same thing that... She couldn't finish the sentence. Then we deal with it, Marcus said firmly. Together. But Sarah, there's a 50% chance you don't have it. Emma's fear doesn't have to be your destiny. A knock interrupted them. Victoria stood in the doorway, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. The board meeting's in an hour. They're expecting answers about... She gestured between them. This situation. Tell them the truth, Marcus said. The truth. Victoria's laugh was sharp. That you hired your long-lost daughter as your physical therapist? That neither of you knew? The press will have a field day. I don't care about the press. Marcus wheeled forward. I've spent 27 years not knowing I had a daughter. Emma spent those years protecting everyone but herself. No more secrets. Sarah touched Emma's journal. She wrote about backups, plans she put in place. Victoria, you were her confidant. What else did she arrange? Victoria sank into a chair, her composure cracking. There's a letter. She gave it to me the day before the accident. Said if anything happened to her, I should make sure it reached you on your 28th birthday. That's in 3 months, Sarah said. She planned everything. Victoria pulled an envelope from her bag. Even the timing. She knew the medical testing age for Huntington's is 28. Knew you'd be old enough to handle the truth. She held out the envelope. I was supposed to wait, but Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Emma's neat handwriting. My dearest daughter, she read aloud. If you're reading this, 2 things are true. I'm no longer alive, and you found your way back to your father. I never wanted to leave you, but I wanted even less to burden you with my fears, my genetic legacy, my complicated choices. I arranged for you to be placed with a family free from our medical history, hoping to give you your best chance. But I also left breadcrumbs, the adoption agency, the hospital records, even your appearance, because you deserved the chance to know the truth when you were ready. Your father is a good man, the best I've ever known. He would have given up everything to raise you, and I couldn't let him sacrifice his dreams only to potentially watch you suffer the same fate as my mother. So I made the hardest choice of my life. I gave you up, and I lied to the man I loved. But I also made preparations. There's a trust fund, managed by Victoria. Money for medical testing, treatment if needed, whatever support you might require. And there are videos, messages I recorded every year on your birthday, telling you about my life, your father's achievements, the grandmother you'll never meet but whose spirit I see in you. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only ask that you understand. Every choice I made was out of love. For you, for your father, for the future I hoped you'd have. With all my heart, Emma. Sarah lowered the letter, tears streaming down her face. Marcus reached for her hand, his own eyes wet. The videos? He asked Victoria. In a safety deposit box, along with medical records, letters, photos, everything she thought Sarah might want to know someday. Sarah squared her shoulders, so like Emma in that moment that both Marcus and Victoria caught their breath. I want to see them all, she said. But first we deal with the board. Together. No more hiding. Marcus nodded. Victoria, call Dr. Reeves. Set up the testing Sarah needs. Then call a press conference. It's time everyone knew what an extraordinary woman my wife was. And, he looked at Sarah, what an extraordinary daughter she gave me. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility, and for the first time with hope. The adoption agency's waiting room was colder than Sarah remembered from her previous attempts to investigate her past. This time, though, she wasn't alone. Marcus sat beside her in his wheelchair, while Victoria stood by the window, making calls to manage the growing media interest in their story. Ms. Foster, the agency director, Dr. Patel, appeared in the doorway. And Mr. Chun, please, come in. Inside her office, Dr. Patel pulled out a thick file. Given the circumstances and the publicity involved, we've expedited your request for full access to the adoption records. She paused, glancing at Marcus. Though it seems you've already uncovered most of the story, we need official confirmation, Victoria said, joining them. Documentation that can't be questioned. Dr. Patel nodded, opening the file. Emma Chun approached us 28 years ago. Her case was unique. She wanted an arrangement that would allow for future contact while maintaining complete confidentiality in the present. The backup plan, Sarah murmured. Precisely. She arranged for sealed records that could only be opened under specific circumstances, either a direct request from you after your 28th birthday, or her death, Marcus finished. Yes, she also left a series of letters, each to be delivered at specific milestones in Sarah's life. Your adoptive parents received them but chose not to share them. Dr. Patel pulled out a bundle of unopened envelopes. They were returned to us after their deaths. Sarah's hands shook as she took the letters. Each envelope was dated, first day of school, sweet 16, high school graduation, college acceptance. A mother's journey through her daughter's life, never delivered. There's more, Dr. Patel continued. Emma made arrangements with her sister-in-law to establish a trust fund for medical care, specifically for genetic testing and treatment related to Huntington's disease. Victoria stepped forward. I have the paperwork for that. Emma made me trustee. We'll need DNA confirmation, of course, Dr. Patel said. Though, given the circumstances, she glanced between Marcus and Sarah, noting their undeniable connection. Already arranged, Marcus said. Dr. Reeves is handling everything. Then there's just one more thing. Dr. Patel pulled out a final envelope. Emma left this with strict instructions. It's to be opened only after the DNA results are confirmed and Sarah has been tested for Huntington's. Sarah stared at the envelope. Did she know about my test results? No, Dr. Patel said gently. But she wanted you to face that knowledge with all the facts, all the context. She was very thorough in her planning. As they left the agency, Sarah clutched the bundle of letters, while Marcus held the final sealed envelope. Victoria was already on the phone with their PR team, managing the story that was rapidly spreading through the media. DNA results should be back tomorrow, Marcus said quietly, and Dr. Reeves can see you next week for the Huntington's test. Sarah nodded, her mind on the unopened letters. She wrote to me. All those years, she was writing to me. She never stopped being your mother, Marcus said. She just showed it in the only way she thought she could. Victoria finished her call and joined them. The press is calling it a medical mystery, a family reunion story. They want interviews. Not until we know everything, Sarah said firmly. Not until we've read all the letters, seen all the videos, and not until she touched the final sealed envelope. Not until we know what Emma wanted us to understand. As they drove back to the mansion, Sarah opened the first letter, dated first day of school. Emma's voice, preserved in ink, filled the car. My darling girl, today you start your journey into the world. I imagine your backpack is too big for your small shoulders, and your shoes are still shiny new. Sarah read until her voice broke, and then Marcus took over. His words giving life to Emma's love, preserved and protected for 28 years, waiting for this moment when father and daughter could discover it together. The investigation was far from over, but for the first time, it felt less like uncovering secrets and more like finding their way home. The first hint that something was changing came during a routine physical therapy session. Marcus jerked suddenly during a leg exercise, startling Sarah. What's wrong? Did I hurt you? No, he said slowly. I felt something in my left toe, just for a second. Sarah immediately switched to assessment mode, her personal emotions giving way to professional training. Can you try to move it consciously? Marcus concentrated, his face tense with effort. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, his big toe twitched. Again, Sarah urged, filming the movement with her phone. The toe twitched once more definitively this time. Is this really happening? Marcus's voice shook. Before Sarah could answer, James appeared in the doorway. The staff are talking, he said without preamble. About you two, the resemblance to Emma, the timing of everything. Rumors are spreading. Let them, Marcus said, still staring at his foot. We're not hiding anymore. It's not just the staff. James handed Sarah his tablet. On the screen was a gossip website with the headline, Tech Billionaire's Miracle Recovery? Love Child or Calculated Deception? The article was worse than the headline, suggesting Sarah had orchestrated the entire situation, using her resemblance to Emma to manipulate Marcus for financial gain. Photos showed her entering and leaving the mansion at various hours, their dinner conversations through windows, moments of physical therapy taken out of context. Victoria's handling the press, Marcus said. We knew this would happen. There's more. James scrolled to another article. They're questioning your judgment, Marcus. The board is concerned about the company's image. And some of the shareholders are suggesting. Suggesting what? That Sarah's presence is causing you to make irrational decisions. That the coincidence is too perfect. They're calling for an independent investigation into her background. Sarah set down the tablet. They think I'm a fraud. It doesn't matter what they think, Marcus started, but Sarah cut him off. It matters to your company, to your reputation. Maybe I should step back, just until the DNA results dash. No, Marcus's voice was firm. I didn't know you were my daughter when I hired you, but I did see your credentials, your references. You're qualified for this job, regardless of our connection. And look, he moved his toe again. It's working. Sarah watched the small movement, torn between professional pride and personal fear. The timing does seem convenient. Recovery like this, just as everything comes to light. Master Chun. A maid appeared in the doorway. There's someone here to see you. She says she's from the licensing board. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The nursing board, they must have seen the articles too. Her professional license could be at risk if they thought she'd manipulated a vulnerable patient. I'll handle this. Victoria's voice came from behind them. None of them had heard her arrive. Sarah, go home. Marcus, you have a board meeting in an hour. James, get the lawyers on the phone. But as Sarah gathered her things, Marcus caught her hand. We're in this together, he said quietly. No matter what they say or think. You're my daughter, and you're helping me walk again. Everything else is just noise. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, staring at Emma's unopened letters. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, old classmates, even tabloid reporters offering money for her story. On TV, financial analysts debated the impact of the Chun family scandal on the company's stock price. Her phone lit up with a text from Marcus. Good news. Dr. Reeves called. DNA results tomorrow morning. The truth in black and white. Sarah typed back, what if the truth makes things worse? His response came quickly. Then we'll face it together, like Emma wanted. Sarah picked up the letter marked Sweet 16 and broke the seal. Inside, Emma's words waited. My darling girl, today you become a young woman, and I wonder what challenges you're facing. She read through tears, hearing Emma's voice in every word, finding strength in her mother's long-ago wisdom. Tomorrow would bring DNA results, board meetings, licensing investigations, and media scrutiny. But tonight, she had these letters. A mother's love, preserved in paper and ink, bridging the years between them. The toe movement video sat unwatched on her phone. Professional ethics warred with personal joy. She was Marcus's daughter, but she was also his therapist. She was Emma's legacy, but also her own person. Somehow, she had to find a way to be both, or risk losing everything they discovered. The DNA results arrived by courier early the next morning. Marcus insisted they open them together in his study, with Victoria present as a witness. Sarah's hands trembled as she broke the seal on the envelope. Wait, Marcus said. He pulled out Emma's final sealed letter, the one from the adoption agency marked after DNA results. We should read them together. Sarah unfolded the lab results first. The clinical language was stark and unambiguous. Probability of paternity, 99.9999%. Conclusion. Marcus Chun cannot be excluded as the biological father of Sarah Foster. Victoria let out a breath. It's official. Sarah opened Emma's letter next, her voice shaking as she read aloud. My dearest Marcus and Sarah, if you're reading this, then science has confirmed what I always knew. You are father and daughter. But there's something else you need to know, something I never told anyone, not even Victoria. Marcus, do you remember that night in the hospital during my residency? The power failure during surgery. What I never told you was that I was already pregnant then. The stress, the fear, the hours of operating by flashlight, it changed something in me. Made me realize how fragile our plans, our lives, our futures really were. When the genetic testing showed the Huntington's marker, it felt like another power failure. Another moment where everything could go dark. I couldn't bear the thought of our child facing that darkness. But I also couldn't bear the thought of terminating the pregnancy. So I made a choice to give our daughter a chance at a different life, free from the shadow of my illness. Sarah, my darling, by now you'll have been tested for Huntington's yourself. Whatever those results show, know that you were born from love, protected by love, and guided back to love. The timing of this letter was deliberate. I wanted you to face those test results with the full knowledge of who you are and where you come from. Marcus, my love, forgive me. I know your heart, you would have wanted to keep our baby, face whatever came together. But I couldn't watch you lose both of us to this disease. Better to lose us separately, I thought, than together. I love you both, more than these words can express. Always, Emma. Sarah looked up to find Marcus crying openly, Victoria wiping her own eyes. The weight of Emma's choice, her sacrifice, hung heavy in the air. She thought she was protecting us, Marcus said quietly. All this time, I thought she didn't trust me enough to tell me about the baby, but she was trying to save me from watching history repeat itself. There's something else, Victoria said, pulling out her phone. The medical board called. They want to review Sarah's license, given the personal complications that have emerged. I'll resign, Sarah said immediately. We can find another therapist, No. Marcus wheeled closer, taking her hand. You're not just my daughter. You're the best therapist I've had. That toe movement yesterday. First progress in 2 years. We fight this. Sarah squeezed his hand, then froze. Marcus, your hand. He looked down. His fingers were squeezing back, a strength that hadn't been there before. Victoria stepped forward. I hate to interrupt, but there's one more thing we need to discuss. She hesitated. Your growing romantic feelings for each other before you knew. The press is already speculating. We need to address it. Sarah felt her face flush. The unspoken attraction that had been building before their discovery. It seemed impossible now, almost grotesque. Yet it had been real, undeniable. We deal with everything, Marcus said firmly. No more secrets. No more hiding. Emma wanted us to know the truth, all of it. So we face it together. Sarah nodded, still holding his hand, feeling the newfound strength in his grip. They had the truth now. But truth, she was learning, could be as complicated as secrets. The media storm broke the next morning. Headlines screamed across every platform. Chen Tech CEO's secret daughter. A medical miracle or calculated fraud? Questions arise about Chen's mental fitness as stock prices plummet. Romantic undertones between CEO and caregiver-turned-daughter raise ethical concerns. Sarah watched her phone's notifications explode as reporters camped outside her apartment building. The medical board had suspended her license pending investigation, and her inbox overflowed with messages from former patients questioning her integrity. Inside the mansion, Marcus faced his own crisis. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting, and Victoria's attempts at damage control weren't working. They're voting tomorrow, Victoria reported, pacing Marcus's study. 3 board members have already indicated they'll support a motion of no confidence. If we lose this vote, I founded this company, Marcus interrupted. Built it from nothing. They can't just . They can and they will, Victoria said firmly. Unless. Sarah looked up from the latest headline. Unless what? Unless we separate. Publicly. Marcus needs to distance himself from this situation. Just until things calm down. No. Marcus's voice was steel. I've lost enough time with my daughter. Then you'll lose everything else, Victoria snapped. The company, your reputation, your legacy. Is that what you want? Before Marcus could respond, James appeared in the doorway. Sir, Dr. Reeves is here. About the test results. Sarah felt her heart stop. In the chaos of the past day, she'd almost forgotten about her Huntington's test. The results that would determine not just her future, but potentially her father's as well. Send her in, Marcus said quietly. Dr. Reeves entered carrying a manila envelope, her face professionally neutral. I thought you'd want to hear this in person, she said, sitting down. Sarah reached for Marcus's hand as Dr. Reeves opened the envelope. Victoria moved closer, her earlier frustration forgotten in this moment of truth. The results are negative, Dr. Reeves announced. You didn't inherit the genes, Sarah. You're clear. The relief hit like a physical wave. Sarah felt her knees buckle, and she sank into a chair. Marcus was crying again, squeezing her hand with his newfound strength. "Emma's greatest fear," he whispered. It didn't come true. The moment of joy was shattered by James rushing back in. "Sir, I'm sorry, but the stock has dropped another 15%. The board is moving the vote to today. They're on their way here now." Sarah stood shakily. "I should go. Give you space to handle this." "No," Marcus said. "Stay. I'm done letting fear of loss drive my decisions. Emma did that, gave up everything because she was afraid of what might happen. I won't make the same mistake." "Marcus," Victoria pleaded, "be reasonable. A temporary separation would be another lie," he finished. "I've had enough lies." He turned to Sarah. "Pack a bag. You're moving in here." "What? But the press, the board We'll deal with it." His voice softened. "Emma wanted us to be a family. Not in secret, not in shame, but openly and honestly. It's time we honored that wish." Sarah looked at the gathering reporters outside the gates, at Victoria's worried face, at the stock ticker scrolling bad news across James's tablet. Everything they'd built was threatening to crumble. But as she met her father's determined gaze, she saw Emma's strength there. The same strength that had made such an impossible choice 28 years ago. The strength to choose love over fear, truth over safety. "Okay," she said. "I'll stay." Victoria sighed, already reaching for her phone. "I'll call the lawyers. If we're doing this, we do it right." Full press conference. Complete transparency. Outside, camera flashes lit up the gathering dusk like lightning. Another storm was coming. But this time, they'd face it together. No backup plans. No escape routes. No hiding in the shadows of what might have been. Marcus squeezed Sarah's hand again, his grip growing stronger by the day. Tomorrow would bring its own battles, the board vote, the medical review, the public judgment. But tonight, in this room, they were simply what Emma had always wanted them to be. A family, finding their way back to each other. The arrival of Emma's sister, Rachel, was unexpected. She appeared at the mansion gates just hours after the board vote had ended in a stalemate. Not enough votes to remove Marcus, but enough to mandate an independent investigation. "I've been following the news," Rachel explained, setting a battered cardboard box on Marcus's desk. "These belong to you now. Both of you." Inside the box were dozens of letters, all written in Emma's precise hand. Unlike the milestone letters from the adoption agency, these were personal, Emma's private thoughts, never meant to be shared. "She wrote to me every week," Rachel said, watching Sarah and Marcus examine the letters. "About everything. Her fears, her hopes, her regrets. Especially about Sarah." Sarah pulled out a letter dated just months before the accident. As she read, her hands began to shake. "Dearest Rachel, I saw her today. My daughter. She was at the hospital volunteering in pediatrics. I almost couldn't breathe. She looked so much like me at that age. I watched her with the children, so gentle, so natural. She'll make an amazing nurse someday. I wanted to run to her, tell her everything. But I saw how happy she was, how complete her life seemed. What right do I have to shatter that peace? To burden her with my history, my illness, my choices? Marcus would never forgive me if he knew I'd found her and said nothing. But I'm protecting them both. Better they never know than risk the pain of losing each other again." "She knew." Sarah looked up, tears streaming. "She knew who I was." Rachel nodded. "The hospital security footage confirms it. Emma would watch you from a distance during your volunteer shifts. She even arranged to be off duty when you were there, so there'd be no accidental meetings." Marcus wheeled closer to the box, pulling out more letters. Each one revealed another layer of Emma's secret vigil. How she'd tracked Sarah's progress through nursing school, her career choices, her movements through life. "There's more," Rachel said quietly. She pulled up a video on her phone. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Emma standing in a hospital corridor, watching through a window as a younger Sarah read to a sick child. Emma's hand pressed against the glass, her face a mix of pride and heartbreak. "She was so close," Sarah whispered. "All that time." The last time I saw Emma, Rachel continued, she told me she was thinking of breaking her silence. The accident happened 3 days later. She never got the chance. Victoria, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Why come forward now? After everything that's happening with the company, the media? Because of this, Rachel pulled out one final letter, dated the day before the accident. Emma wrote it but never sent it. I think you both need to hear it. Marcus took the letter with trembling hands. My dearest Rachel, I can't do this anymore. Watching from a distance, pretending my heart doesn't shatter every time I see her. Sarah has grown into everything I hoped she'd be. Strong, compassionate, dedicated to helping others, just like her father. Tomorrow I'm telling Marcus everything. About the pregnancy, the adoption, finding Sarah again. He'll be angry, hurt, betrayed. But seeing her at the hospital, watching her become the healer I always wanted to be, I realized my greatest mistake wasn't giving her up. It was letting fear keep us apart all these years. I've arranged everything: legal documents, medical records, trust funds. No more secrets, no more hiding. It's time for my family to be whole again. All my love, Emma. The silence that followed was heavy with what might have been. Sarah found herself looking at the security footage still playing on Rachel's phone. Emma's face pressed against the glass. So close and yet so far. She tried to help me, Sarah realized suddenly. During my hospital rotations, there were anonymous suggestions about which departments needed nurses, which programs were accepting applications. She couldn't be your mother, Rachel said gently, but she found ways to guide you, to protect you, even from a distance. Marcus stared at the final letter, his fingers tracing Emma's words. She was coming home to tell me. That night in the car. Was that why we took the scenic route? She wanted time to find the words. Rachel nodded. She'd planned everything, even had a dinner reservation for the next night. For all three of you. Sarah felt her world shift again. All those years of wondering about her birth mother. And Emma had been there, watching, waiting, gathering courage. The accident hadn't just taken her mother. It had stolen their chance at reunion, at understanding, at forgiveness. But as she looked at Marcus, at the growing strength in his hands as he held Emma's last letter, she realized something. Emma's final wish had come true after all. Her family was whole again, different than she'd planned, marked by loss and discovery rather than a quiet dinner revelation, but whole nonetheless. Outside, reporters still camped at the gates, and tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they had Emma's words, her love, her truth. And maybe Sarah thought that was enough. The medical board hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. Sarah sat in the sterile conference room, watching the board members file in with their stern expressions and manila folders filled with press clippings. Ms. Foster, the board chairman began, we're here to review allegations of professional misconduct regarding your relationship with Marcus Chun. Specifically, the failure to disclose a developing personal relationship with a patient and continuing to provide care after discovering a familial connection. Before Sarah could respond, the door opened. Marcus wheeled himself in, followed by a team of lawyers and, surprisingly, Victoria. My brother would like to make a statement, Victoria announced. The chairman frowned. Mr. Chun, this is a closed hearing. About my caregiver's license, Marcus interrupted. The same license that has helped me regain partial mobility for the first time in 2 years. He demonstrated by moving his hands with newfound control. The same professional expertise that's given me a chance to walk again. The board recognizes your progress, Mr. Chen, another member said. But the ethical implications were impossible to disclose because we didn't know. Sarah spoke up. How could I report a familial connection I wasn't aware of? And once we discovered the truth, we immediately sought guidance from medical ethics consultants. Victoria stepped forward, laying a thick folder on the table. Documentation from 3 independent ethics boards, all confirming that Sarah's continued care, given the unique circumstances and Mr. Chen's explicit consent, falls within acceptable professional boundaries. The board members exchanged glances. There's still the matter of public perception, the chairman said. The appearance of impropriety is exactly that appearance, Marcus cut in. My daughter is being punished for circumstances beyond her control, for doing her job exceptionally well, for helping me heal. And the reported romantic tension before the discovery? A board member asked sharply. Sarah felt her face flush, but held her ground. We acknowledge those feelings existed. We also acknowledge they were based on a connection we didn't understand, a biological pull we couldn't recognize. The moment we discovered the truth, all such feelings were immediately addressed in therapy. Victoria produced another document. Statements from their family counselor, confirming healthy boundaries have been established. The deliberation took 3 hours. When the board returned, their decision was carefully worded. Sarah's license would be temporarily suspended for 3 months, during which she would complete additional ethics training. She could continue treating Marcus only under supervision from another licensed therapist. Outside the hearing room, Sarah let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for days. Thank you, she said to Victoria, for helping. I know you had concerns. I still do, Victoria admitted. But seeing Marcus fight for you today, it reminded me of Emma, that same fierce protection of family. She smiled slightly. Welcome to the Chun stubbornness, Sarah. Marcus reached for Sarah's hand. We have another fight ahead. The company board is meeting tomorrow, Victoria finished. But first, there's something you both need to see. She pulled out her tablet. Emma's charitable foundation? I've been going through the records. You won't believe what I found. Sarah looked at her father, seeing the same mix of hope and fear she felt reflected in his eyes. Emma's secrets were still unfolding, each revelation, changing their understanding of the past. But at least now they faced each discovery together, their bond growing stronger with every truth uncovered. Behind them, the medical board's decision was already hitting the news feeds. Another storm of publicity would follow, but somehow it mattered less now. They had fought their first major battle together and won. The specialized rehabilitation center sat on the outskirts of the city, far from the media's prying eyes. Marcus had insisted on coming here after his latest physical assessment showed increasing nerve response in his legs. It's not just about walking again, he explained to Sarah, who sat beside him in the initial consultation. It's about doing this right. Professional boundaries, proper documentation. No more fuel for the critics. Dr. Emilia Santos, the center's director, reviewed Marcus's latest scans. The nerve regeneration is remarkable. Whatever therapy you've been doing, she glanced at Sarah. It's working, but you'll need intensive treatment to maximize recovery. How intensive? Sarah asked, careful to maintain her role as daughter rather than therapist. 6 hours a day minimum. 3 months initial commitment. Dr. Santos looked directly at Marcus. And complete focus. No business calls, no board meetings, no media distractions. Victoria, standing by the window, spoke up. The company can wait, Marcus finished. I've already drafted my temporary leave of absence. The board can't object to medical necessity. Meanwhile, Sarah had her own healing to manage. Her therapist, Dr. Chun, no relation, though the name made her smile, helped her navigate the complex emotions of her discovered identity. I feel guilty, Sarah admitted during one session, about the feelings I had for him before we knew. Like I should have somehow sensed the truth. There's no biological radar for genetic connection, Dr. Chun replied. You responded to qualities you recognized subconsciously, his mannerisms, his expressions, the same things you inherited from him. Sarah twisted Emma's locket in her hands, a gift found in the box of letters. I keep reading her words, watching the hospital videos, trying to understand her choices. And what do you understand so far? That love and fear can look very similar sometimes. That trying to protect people can end up hurting them instead. Back at the rehabilitation center, Marcus made steady progress. Sarah visited daily, but now as family rather than caregiver. She watched from the observation room as he worked with his new therapists. His determination familiar, the same drive she saw in herself. He's doing it for you, you know, Victoria said, joining her at the window. All this work, this focus. He wants to walk you down the aisle someday. Sarah smiled. First, I have to find someone willing to join this complicated family. Speaking of family, Victoria hesitated. The trust Emma set up is not just money, there's property too. A house by the lake where she planned to tell you both the truth. It's yours whenever you're ready. Sarah watched her father take another assisted step, his face set in concentration. Not yet, she said. We're still finding our balance here first. The healing continued in unexpected ways. The media's interest gradually waned as other stories took precedence. Sarah's ethics training provided insights she hadn't anticipated, helping her understand Emma's medical decisions from a new perspective. Marcus's board accepted his medical leave without protest, perhaps relieved to have time for the controversy to settle. One evening, after a particularly grueling therapy session, Marcus found Sarah in Emma's garden. Dr. Santos says I might be ready for parallel bars next week, he said, wheeling up beside her. Sarah nodded, touching a rose bush Emma had planted. I found something today, she said, in one of her journals. The day she planted these roses, she wrote about you, about how you never gave up on anything once you set your mind to it. Like daughter, like father, Marcus smiled. Then, more seriously, we're going to be okay, you know? All of this, the company, your career, our family, it's all going to work out. Sarah looked at her father, seeing Emma's determination in his eyes. How can you be so sure? Because we've already survived the impossible. Everything else is just details. Together, they watched the sunset paint Emma's roses in shades of gold, each lost in thoughts of healing, of growth, of second chances blooming in unexpected places. Ready? Dr. Santos asked, positioning herself beside the parallel bars. Marcus gripped the bars, his knuckles white with tension. Sarah watched from the designated family area, her heart racing as fast as his. Remember, Dr. Santos continued, we're not aiming for steps yet, just weight-bearing. But Marcus had that look in his eyes, the one Sarah recognized from her own reflection when faced with a challenge. Slowly, purposefully, he began to pull himself up from the wheelchair. Easy, Dr. Santos cautioned. Let the bars support you. Marcus was already standing. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his legs held. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus Chun stood upright, supporting his own weight. Then, before anyone could stop him, he moved his right foot forward. One step. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Dr. Santos quickly moved to spot him, but Marcus was already taking another step. And another. Mr. Chun, Dr. Santos warned, this isn't in today's plan. Emma loved to dance, Marcus said through gritted teeth, still moving forward. She used to say, every step was a story, another step. This one's for her. He made it halfway down the bars before his strength gave out. The therapists caught him safely, easing him back into his chair, but his face shone with triumph. Later that afternoon, Sarah was sorting through Emma's foundation paperwork when she discovered something extraordinary. The foundation hadn't just helped adopted children. It had specifically focused on reuniting families separated by medical circumstances. Emma had been building a support network for families exactly like theirs, even before they knew they needed it. Look at this, Sarah showed Marcus the documents. She wasn't just planning to tell us the truth. She was preparing a way to help us deal with it. Marcus studied the papers. The foundation's last project before she died, a retreat center for reunited families. The plans were never completed. We could finish it, Sarah suggested. Give other families what we had to find on our own. Marcus looked at his legs, still tingling from their breakthrough moment. A place where people can learn to walk together again, in every sense. Emma's last gift, Sarah said softly, turning our story into hope for others. As they reviewed the foundation plans, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Board saw the therapy video. Unanimous vote of confidence. Your position is secure. Come back when you're ready. Sarah smiled at the news, then returned to the foundation documents. Between the lines of Emma's careful planning, she could read another story, one of a mother who never stopped believing that love would find a way to bring her family back together. Marcus took her hand, his grip strong and steady. Ready to help me walk this path? Sarah squeezed back. Every step of the way. The transformation of Emma's foundation began on a crisp autumn morning. Marcus stood at his desk, using a walker now instead of the wheelchair, while Sarah and Victoria reviewed architectural plans spread across the surface. The retreat center can house 12 families at a time, Sarah explained, pointing to the blueprints. Each suite designed for privacy, but with common areas for shared healing. Emma's original plans included a medical wing, Victoria added, for families dealing with genetic conditions, ongoing treatments. Marcus traced the outline of the building with his finger. We'll need more than just facilities. We need programs, counselors, medical staff. Already working on it, Sarah said. I've contacted several adoption agencies. There's a whole network of families like ours, separated by medical fears, trying to find their way back to each other. The foundation work gave them a new purpose, a way to transform their complicated story into something bigger than themselves. Each day brought progress, both in the retreat center's development and in Marcus's recovery. During one particularly meaningful afternoon, they visited Emma's grave together. Marcus walked the last few steps unaided, placing fresh roses beside the headstone. She would have loved this, he said quietly. Seeing us working together, helping others. Sarah knelt beside him, touching the cool marble. I used to imagine conversations with my birth mother. Now I have her letters, her journals, her plans. Sometimes it feels like she's still guiding us. She is, Marcus replied. Through every family we help, every story we change. Victoria arrived later with news from the board. They're not just accepting the foundation project, they want to make it the company's major philanthropic focus. Emma's vision, scaled to help thousands. Sarah watched her father stand straighter, stronger, no longer bowed by grief or guilt. They were building something new from the pieces of their broken past. Not just a foundation or a retreat center, but a legacy worthy of Emma's sacrifice. That evening, working late in Emma's garden, Sarah found another journal hidden beneath a loose brick in the garden wall. The final entry read, "My dearest family, if you're reading this, you've found your way back to each other. Remember, love doesn't divide when shared. It multiplies. Let my choices guide you not toward regret, but toward possibility. Build something beautiful from our story." Marcus joined her, walking slowly but steadily down the garden path. Together, they began planning the garden for the retreat center, a place where other families could begin their own journey of reconstruction. Marcus chose CNN for their first public interview, with Victoria orchestrating every detail. The setting was deliberately casual. The mansion's garden, Emma's roses blooming in the background. Sarah sat beside her father, who stood with minimal support from a cane. 2 years ago, the interviewer began. You lost your wife and your mobility in a tragic accident. Now you found a daughter and are walking again. How do you make sense of it all? Marcus glanced at Sarah before answering. Life rarely moves in straight lines. Emma understood that better than anyone. She made choices, difficult, loving choices, that we're only now beginning to understand. Sarah, the interviewer turned to her. Your work with adopted children has gained attention recently. Some say it's an attempt to rehabilitate your image after the controversy. The only thing I'm trying to rehabilitate is families, Sarah responded calmly. Every adoption story is unique, but they all share one truth. Love sometimes means making impossible choices. The interview shifted to the foundation's work. Marcus demonstrated his improving mobility, walking through Emma's garden as he described their plans for the retreat center. And the company? The interviewer asked. How has this personal journey affected your leadership? It's made me a better leader, Marcus said. Understanding Emma's courage, watching Sarah's dedication to helping others, it's reminded me why I built this company in the first place, to make a difference. That evening, as positive responses flooded in, Victoria shared the news. The board had unanimously withdrawn their demands for Marcus's resignation. Sarah's work with adopted children had garnered support from medical and adoption advocacy groups. Emma would be proud, Sarah said, watching the interview replay, not just of the foundation, but of how we've chosen to honor her story. Marcus stood by the window, his stance growing stronger each day. She always saw the bigger picture. Now it's our turn to help others see it too. The media narrative was shifting, from scandal to inspiration, from controversy to redemption. But for Sarah and Marcus, the real victory wasn't in public opinion. It was in the growing stack of letters from other families seeking help, hoping to find their own way back to each other. They were no longer just father and daughter finding their way. They were becoming what Emma had always hoped they'd be: healers, bridge builders, storytellers of hope. The foundation's first fundraiser transformed the mansion's grounds into an elegant gathering space. Families from across the country shared stories of separation and reunion, of medical fears overcome, of love rediscovered. At the center of it all stood Marcus Chen, without his cane for the first time in public. Walking isn't just about physical strength, he told the gathered crowd. It's about having something worth walking toward. He gestured to Sarah, who stood at the podium beside him. Sometimes the path leads us places we never expected to find. Sarah had moved into the guest house 2 weeks earlier, close enough for family dinners, but with boundaries that felt right for their unique situation. Her therapy practice now focused exclusively on helping families navigate medical trauma and reunion. Her suspended license fully reinstated with commendations for ethical handling of her own complex case. Emma's vision was always bigger than our story, Sarah addressed the audience. The retreat center opens next month, but we're already fielding calls from families around the world. Every story is different, but the thread remains the same: love finds a way. Victoria, watching from the side, smiled as she checked the donation totals on her tablet. The foundation had surpassed its initial funding goals within the first hour. But more importantly, she saw something in her brother and niece that had been missing before peace. After the event, Sarah found Marcus in Emma's garden, practicing his walking exercises. "The guest house feels right," she said, joining him. "Close but separate. Our own space to grow into this new reality." Marcus nodded, his steps steady and sure. Emma would approve. She always believed in giving people room to find their own way back to each other. Together, they watched the sunset paint the garden in shades of possibility, each step forward a new beginning in their unexpected journey home. 1 year later, Marcus and Sarah stood together at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Chun Foster Rehabilitation and Family Reunification Center. The modern facility gleamed in the morning sun, its grounds reminiscent of Emma's garden, with the same roses blooming along winding paths. Today marks not just an opening, Marcus addressed the crowd, standing tall without support, but a fulfillment of a dream that began 28 years ago with one woman's impossible choice. The center combined state-of-the-art medical facilities with family counseling services and temporary housing for reuniting families. Emma's original plans had been expanded, enhanced by Sarah's experience and Marcus's vision. "My mother believed in backup plans." Sarah continued the speech, her hand resting on her father's shoulder. "But she also believed in second chances. This center represents both: a safety net for families facing medical crises and a bridge back to each other when they're ready." Victoria approached them after the ceremony, holding Emma's last journal. "Found this while clearing the old office. There's something you both should see." The final entry was dated the morning of the accident. "My dearest loves, today I finally found the courage to tell the truth. I've watched our daughter bloom into an extraordinary woman, seen my husband's strength tested and proven, and realized that my fears, though born of love, have kept us from our greatest joy, being a family. Tonight we'll have dinner together. All the secrets will end. Whatever comes after, genetics, illness, uncertainty, we'll face it together. All my love, Emma." Marcus touched the page gently. "She never made it to that dinner, but she got her wish anyway. We found each other." Sarah smiled through tears. "And now we're helping other families do the same." Later that evening, they gathered in Emma's garden. Marcus, Sarah, Victoria, and James, raising glasses to the woman who had orchestrated their reunion from beyond, whose love had proven stronger than fear, whose choices had rippled out to touch countless other families. To Emma, Marcus said softly, looking at his daughter, who gave us the greatest gift, the chance to find our way home. Sarah squeezed his hand, both of them standing strong in the garden where their story had begun anew. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, while inside the new center, families began their own journeys of healing, reunion, and redemption. Emma's roses bloomed around them, their fragrance a reminder that love, like flowers, can grow in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the longest way home is the one that brings us full circle, back to the truth that was waiting all along. The end.